Right, let's get moving to the next major location. Looks like this clip is going to be another abrupt cutoff point, since it's going to be way too long to fit into a half-hour period regardless. At the very least, once we got finished with the Earth Cave, it feels like the game has sped up in pace at least a little, so I suppose that's something. That maybe that has more to do with me than the game itself. Dear God, we haven't even gotten back to the boat and we've already taken more damage than I was expecting. It's a good thing I bought so many damn potions. Really? Only one of the bugs? But we just went through a fight against 4 of them at once. Right. Back in the boat. Now let's see if our next destination is a town or a dungeon. We're certainly well supplied enough for a long haul, that's for sure. And look at that! Some of the random encounters are going to give us more supplies here. Possibly one of the reasons I didn't bother to grab all the possible potions and eye potions before leaving the last town. Apparently, we need the canoe again to get to the next destination, and I'm looking at an online map very carefully, so there's little risk of me just wandering aimlessly for an obscene amount of time, just trying to figure out where to go next. Definitely gonna be something I'm gonna do a lot in plenty of the role-player games I end up recording. I'm sorry, but why are mundane crocodiles treated as approximately as dangerous as a goddamn Hydra? In mythology, Hydras are supernatural creatures that can heal so damn fast that decapitating them isn't enough to finish them off. Crocodiles are normal predator animals. Sure, a croc is going to be more dangerous than a single wolf, but it's nowhere near the same level of oh shit as a Hydra. Just one of the various unimportant things that's probably gonna drive me crazy. Right, so we've got an ice-focused sword, and we've just entered a cavern that is entirely made of ice. I somehow doubt that Boromir is gonna do all that well in here, at least until we run into some convenient fire sword down here or something to that effect. Is there going to be some ice-focused boss in this place, or is it gonna be too short for bosses? Is this... Yeah, all I know is that it's not going to be one of the locations where we restore a crystal, so it's not absolutely critical as far as I know. Mummies! Guess we've got an undead presence here in the frozen dungeon. Funny, I thought we were done with the undead after the Earth Cave, but I suppose that just shows what I know. Well, Wesker's certainly gonna earn his keep in here if they're gonna keep coming at us in those kinds of numbers, that's for sure. Apparently, there wasn't anything worth grabbing on the first floor according to the map. I doubt that's gonna be the case on the second floor, mostly because according to the raw footage, things are going to take a while here. Really don't get why hammers, a weapon that's usually something to convey strength, is exclusive to a character class that has garbage strength in this game. I'm also kind of annoyed that the game doesn't have any classes that use spears. especially since some of my favorite characters in later Final Fantasies are spear users. It doesn't help that, historically, spears were a pretty damn common weapon, and it's not like this game has to worry about animating any spear combat. The animation in this game is literally as basic as they come. We definitely have been burning through regular potions at a rapid pace. Understandable considering the amount of health we have at this point and the amount of damage we take with each individual strike the enemy throws at us this far in. But considering the most basic potions are more effective at healing than a cure spell for some reason, it's hard to really call that item obsolete and not worth the money this far in. Okay, so we get to the 3rd floor, then shift right back to a different part of the 2nd floor? A bit interesting there. Does that mean we're gonna end up in the alternate section of the 1st floor or something? Well, there's some chests in here, and apparently some invisible bits of ground that we're not supposed to walk onto. And there is no in-game hints about the fact that the ground will break under our feet. I can't find it in me to be as annoyed with sections of random ground breaking under us in the ice dungeon than sections of lava we had to walk over in the volcano. Sure, this makes sure that this dungeon is going to last longer than the sheer amount of ground that it actually has, but still, as environmental hazards go, the attrition it causes isn't anywhere near as frustrating to me, since we do gain something with every fight we go through, and the falls themselves do not do any damage, as far as I can tell. It just makes the dungeon last longer. Why do I get the feeling that those spikes on the ground are the replacement for lava? Come to think of it, was I supposed to go to this ice cave that wasn't even mentioned back in the town before the volcano with the snake boss lady? Because, visually at least, this dungeon feels like a less harrowing place than the previous one that we just got finished with. Yeah. Once again, every step we take on a certain kind of ground hurts us a little, and we're gonna be forced to walk over it. Why? Just why did I think the only time we'd ever have to deal with that kind of hazard was in the volcano? The second of 4 major dungeons meant to restore the elemental energy of the planet. A gimmick like that is probably a bit of a pain to program in, especially in a game originally designed for the Famicom and Super Nintendo system. Yeah, definitely not a fan of the encounter rate when you take 2 or 3 steps and get into yet another fight. By the way, maybe I'm just not looking at it the right way, but that dragon doesn't look all that white to me. If you're generous, you could say it looks silver, but it kind of looks more like a shade of blue to me at the moment. It probably doesn't help that the entire environment around it is varying shades of blue. It's actually kind of funny that generally I do like the color blue. But I don't like ice locations in video games. It's just weird how that works. Okay, some ice armor. I can appreciate that to some degree, but I kind of would have liked to see something like that before we entered the ice-themed location. Seriously, why did we have to go pretty deep into the volcano to find items that had defensive properties against fire-based monsters? That's the sort of thing we should be able to get before going into that location filled with that kind of threat. And while I'm at it, why is it that the warrior class is the only character type that gets elementally attuned defenses? Shouldn't the black mage at the very least get something like that as well? After all, the black mage throws around various fireballs and generates ice out of nowhere just like the enemy can. If you can throw out that kind of attack, shouldn't that mean that you're resistant to that same style of damage? Oh, wait, that's right. This is back when role-player video games were extremely young, so a concept simple enough that even the first Pokemon generation touched on it, like special defenses versus physical defenses, probably didn't get a lot of thought put into it for this game. It's not gonna change the fact that my brain is kind of programmed at this point to assume that if someone is magically capable, then they should be able to tank a magical attack, while the physically adept fighters tank the physical stuff. So many steps without another fight, and after a while, I tensed up, expecting the absolute next step to trigger the next fight. I'm sorry, why do all the Dark Wizards look exactly like Astos, that Dark Elf prince from earlier in the game? Why not call them Dark Elves as well? And while I'm at it, why the hell is some nude wild man that isn't exactly a berserker in an ice environment? Granted, it's not like our characters change clothes based on their environment or something, but these guys only showed up in this ice environment. Well, that bit of healing isn't gonna make up for the sheer amount of damage they could do in their next spell. These bastards are certainly a step up from the other forgettable monsters we'll keep running into around here. Definitely something to be worried about, even if they look ridiculous in this environment. How much of this clip have I spent just healing from the damage we've been taking in absolutely every fight? The attrition began literally the moment we started walking away from the town. And considering the length of time before I save the game again, I have to wonder if even buying 90 potions and 90 eye potions is gonna be enough. That's certainly a nice number of chests in the room. I somehow doubt that there's going to be anything especially critical in here. Still, no harm in opening them all now that we've found them. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Another variety of wolf? Granted, it's a palette swap that we haven't seen before, but it's still another palette swap of something we fought against since the absolute first clip of the game. Just what has given these wolves such staying power? Their sprites are as generic as they come. And sure, the further in the game the palette swap is introduced, the more health points they have and the more damage they can do. But that's not really adding all that much to make them actually worth seeing over and over and over again. Anyway, that room had nothing but obscene amounts of money for us to grab. And money is one of the things we really don't need that much of, considering we're drowning in it at this point in the game. Okay, just one chest in here. Though for a moment I was worried that there was no alternate way out of this room and that we'd have to go out the way we came in. Definitely not going to have any money troubles for a long time unless one of the next towns we walk into has equipment with absolutely obscene prices. to the point that the local economy is probably in the pits because very few people can actually afford whatever's in their stores. Anyway, looks like we've got some more enemies that feel like they really shouldn't have been sent in here. It's certainly been a while since we've seen any of these Bisco demons. Back then I thought these things were like a mini-boss. Now they're just another forgettable random encounter. Hell, these Cthulhu-inspired bastards aren't even as worrying to deal with as the dark wizard things we just fought against not too long ago. Yet from a visual design standpoint, they look like they should be something relatively scary to deal with. I know you can't judge a book by its cover and all that. Still, with the sheer number of monsters we end up running into over the course of a single dungeon, much less the entire game, you kinda have to try to guess what you're in for based on how they look. If those staffs had a curved blade at the end like a reaper, then they'd feel pretty menacing in their own right. But with their green cloaks and the beads on them, I can't help feeling these are just voodoo-practicing elves working for Santa. Granted, I'm sure that things with Grim Reaper imagery are pretty generic in their own right, but generic and kind of intimidating is better than generic and bland or unintentionally funny. And great, I'm getting outright nitpicky in order to have things to say around here. It had to happen eventually, I suppose. At least it took me 19 clips for that to start happening in this game. Or at least for it to start happening in a way that I noticed myself doing it. Pretty amazing considering we're 19 clips in when there is no real story to speak of, with no real characters interacting with one another. Three more chests! It definitely says something about video games when I just have a hard time giving a damn about money in large sections of it, whereas in real life, I would feel like there's no such thing as having too much money. Probably because I've never actually been obscenely rich, because video game economies, it is just a lot simpler to deal with than real-life economics. Especially since we don't have to pay for food and water and various other things. Seriously, you barely need to do much of anything in some games for you to gain money at a solid rate. And while there are some games that make it more of a pain in the ass to gain resources, this is not one of those. If anything, my big issue at the moment is that there doesn't feel like there's enough to be worth buying in the game at this point. It was a bit of an issue for me in Mass Effect as well, in quite a few entries. Yes, in some ways I prefer to deal with far more limited resources, almost to the point of survival horror, which makes it surprising that I haven't done more survival horror games on this channel. Considering we're bouncing around different floors a number of times, I have no clue how much of the dungeon we've gone through and how much is left to explore. Which of course means I have no clue if the regular potions are gonna last long enough for us to get to the dungeon boss, assuming this dungeon even has a boss. Wait, what? That was the exit of the entire dungeon? Guess we're going back in because I have no clue what happened there, and there's at least a few things still to grab in here, I assume. Dear God, I'm probably going to end up ending this clip on a section of the dungeon we've already gone through. Still, I've got to end it sometime, and this is starting to feel like a reasonable enough length. We can save beating down other blood bones in the next clip. Once we get to the staircase, we're done for now. I've got to admit, my first thought was to let this clip be around 28 minutes long. But since part of things here is me accidentally leaving when we weren't supposed to, I need to give myself a chance to crack a drink instead of letting this be a borderline half-hour-long clip. It's more my fault for not reading an online map well enough to know not to walk up that particular staircase or something. But I suppose I could have blamed the game for making this dungeon so easy to get lost in. Kind of wish that the spells in our menu were organized a different way. If I don't buy a set of spells in a given level, or only buy one in that level, I'd rather not see those blank spaces. It gives me the impression that we're at the end of the list of spells, even when we actually aren't. Okay, so apparently that spell doesn't have damage numbers. It just instantly destroys absolutely everything that it can possibly touch. I'm sure that boss fights and flying enemies aren't affected by Quake at all, so I can't really call it an overpowered spell. Yeah, definitely not worth it to try to use Quake against these bastards. Would it have been better to use the lightning spell instead of the fire one against those birds? Not that it really matters, I'll stick with what works, but it's still something I can't help wondering about.